Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for attending our third webinar in this series. I know your time is valuable, so I hope you get a lot out of this today. My name's Danny McShane. I'm the Business Development Director for Telemachus, and I help businesses solve problems using technology. For a while now, GDPR has been the topic on everyone's mind. This series of webinars is designed to help organisations prepare for GDPR, and we're very fortunate to be joined by a great speaker today who's kindly dialed in from a remote location to be with us. A spot of housekeeping first. All attendees are muted, but if anyone has a question, please type it into the text box as we go, and I'll put the questions to Joe at the end. This is the third webinar in the series, so for those of you that haven't seen the previous ones, we've made those available online. If anyone would like the links, send them to them. My contact details will be available at the end of the session, so just let me know. The slides of this webinar are available within the handout section for download. The first webinar was a review of what GDPR is, where it came from, how it will affect businesses. The second webinar, we went through processes and procedures that your organisations can put in place to start getting ready for GDPR. This is really the first of the webinars that will focus on how technology can help you comply with GDPR. Our guest speaker today is someone who works for the world leader in data location and classification. But briefly, before I bring Joe in to introduce himself properly, I'll just recap on what we went over in the first two webinars. So there are a lot of aspects that need to be considered when looking at GDPR, and they cover people, processes, and technologies. So it needs to be assessed at a level with authority over all three. This is typically, not always, board level. Technology is available to assist with all aspects of data protection and data loss prevention. The question organisations will have to answer is, as businesses that choose to store data electronically, should you adopt new technologies to help you secure your data? And we went through 5 essential steps in preparing for GDPR. Most importantly, if you haven't already, get started now. May 2018 is fast approaching, and this is the biggest shake-up to data protection in 20 years. Second, create a data loss response plan, and we went through the ways in which that can be done and the benefits that it can bring to an organisation in responsible data management. This webinar will discuss how you can carry out the essential step of locating the data within your network, and particularly sensitive data. But before I begin, can I just carry out a quick poll? How many of you know where your data is currently? Not where it should be, but where it actually is. I shall just let that go. Right. People are fairly certain of where their data is at the moment, which is good to hear. Hopefully we can see if that might change somewhat during the course of the webinar. On that note, and to talk us through location and classification of data, let me hand you over to Joe Pedden.
Danny, thank you very much for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us today on the third, as Danny said, of the webinar series that have been organised by Telemachus. As Danny has said, my name is Joe Pedden. I run operations for an organisation called Spirion. Spirion have been delivering data discovery and classification to the industry for the past 11 years across the globe. We have developed extraordinary expertise in the field of data discovery and classification, which I'd like to share with you this afternoon. One of the challenges that I encounter when looking at this subject matter is there are many companies that talk about the regulations and what you need to do to be compliant. You also then look at software companies that talk about how great their technology is. What I'll endeavor to do today is to bring those two together and show you how you can use our software solution and platform and technologies to deliver on good data governance and compliance. Danny, could you introduce the first slide for me, please? So I thought what we'd begin with would be, as Danny's already asked the question, had a little poll with you, I thought we'd begin with a little question. Here's a screenshot that I took a few weeks back that contains some PCI data. I was wondering if any of you can identify the PCI data. Danny, if you hit the space bar, you would notice here that actually displayed in the screen capture. I was doing my expenses, and the screen capture actually captured my American Express receipt that was sitting in the background. Shows my contact details and my card number. Experian is able to go through images and actually detect PCI data. Yeah, we've got an OCR engine built in, but it's simple things like this. People, like Danny said at the start, people believe they know where their data should be, but are often unaware of where their data actually is. It often ends up email attachments and Excel spreadsheets in locations where it should not be located. Danny, let's have a look at the next slide. So here we can see the spreadsheet. As you can see, the Experian in-app classification says that this spreadsheet contains PCI data. I'll give you 10 seconds here to see if anybody can identify the PCI data. It's quite obvious that this file contains PII data, but when we look, it's very difficult for a human to detect the PCI data. And if we hit the space bar down, we'll actually see here there are actually some hidden columns. And again, Danny, for me. Danny, you press the space bar? There were hidden columns in this spreadsheet, and that's one of the reasons, or one of the common challenges for a human. When asked how to classify data, many companies come to us and say, Joe, we want to be able for our users to be able to classify data. As you can see, classification and discovery is a task not really designed for humans. When we discover the classification, we will automatically insert into the header of the file, or the alternative data stream of the file, a 32-digit metadata tag to denote what classification has been assigned to that file based on its data type. We will also read the context of the data, such as where it is located, the data was modified, the data was created, so we can enforce such things as retention policies. We will also put an icon overlay over the file icon in Windows, so it's very easy for the users to see exactly what classification has been assigned to the file. Important to note, the classification schema and the icons are based on your business rules. We will work with you to configure the system, and the key word here is configure. Experian is a bit like Microsoft Office. There is no programming involved in this deployment. If you can verbalize your business rules, you can configure Experian to enforce them across your entire estate. So Danny, if you go to the next slide.
Yep.
This slide outlines what we do and where we do it. So we will do discovery across your entire estate. We can install local agents on workstations running the Windows operating systems, Mac OS, or Linux Red Hat. Alternatively, you can use our agentless discovery team to interrogate such systems as, let's say, an IBM mainframe, a Unisys system, an AS400, to interrogate data stored on your cloud in OneDrive, Google Suite, Box, or Dropbox. So wherever your data is located across your entire estate, be that your private cloud or on-prem, we can use either our agent or agentless discovery mechanisms to discover all sensitive data. We will do that across your unstructured data. We will do it across your image file. We will do it across your email systems. We will interrogate your SharePoint or any database to which we can make a native database connection, an OLEDB connection, or an ODBC connection. And when we find that data, we will process it through our AnyFind library. And this is a library of branching algorithms that validate that what we have discovered is exactly what we say it is. And we will look at default for all your PCI data, all your PII data, all your PHI data, all HIPAA data, all ITAR data, or any other customer-specific data type that you may wish to define to Experian with a greater than 98% accuracy over the lifetime of the product. This is important, as Danny said in his initial slide, in the remediation and minimization of the exposure of sensitive data across your estate. And of course, in compliance with Articles 30 to 35 of GDPR and reporting on a privacy impact assessment, we have by far the best reporting and formative engine available in the industry today. Danny, you look at the next slide.
Yep.
So how do we do this? If you look at this slide, we've actually scanned a text file. This text file, as you can see, is a simple TCP dump. But within it, by pure random chance, there's a 16-digit number that will actually pass, when we scanned it, it actually passed a bin check and validated as a Premier Visa card number for the Raleigh and Carrells Bank in Caracas. The number actually passes a LUN check, which is also a secondary test to validate that a number is a genuine credit card number. But we as humans know this is actually a false positive, although many alternative systems available in the industry today would actually report this as a valid credit card number. So what Experian does, Experian uses its branching algorithms to validate that this is not a credit card number. So we would look for things like, is there a source code or a routing number nearby? Is there a start date or an end date nearby? Is there a CV number nearby? All of the information that you would expect to find in conjunction with a credit card number are missing. It's just pure random chance in a sea of digits. And so we validate this as a false positive, thereby using our library of branching algorithms again to generate our accuracy up over 98%. And it is only through this accuracy of discovery across all of the locations of your estate can you hope to automate the process of data classification. And again, to reinforce why is automated data classification so important? Well, we've seen earlier the two examples. It was difficult to see where my credit card data was displayed on the screenshot. It was impossible to see where the PCI data was displayed or located within the spreadsheet. But even if we could see it, what happens is users will classify that data inconsistently. Or after a few weeks of having to manually classify the data, you run into a situation called user fatigue, where users will simply select the first option in the list so they can get moving on with the real job. And so you end up with a mess within your classification in that data has been incorrectly classified, and it is almost impossible to remediate thereafter. Danny, next slide, please. So as I said, Experian is very similar to Microsoft Office. We provide toolbars that are very easy to use and intuitive to use. We can switch on all the classic PII and PCI data types simply by selecting the button from the toolbar. We can look for user-specific or client-specific data types, such as, let's say, an employee ID or a contract ID or any other piece of internal or intellectual property that you want to search for, using our keywords, our regexes, and dictionary. Now, by definition, those modes of discovery are very weak. And so we use our sensitive data engine to combine your custom types with our standard types, looking for context, weighting, and combine them with our AnyFind library of branching algorithms to, again, even for your custom types, drive your accuracy of discovery across your locations up over 98%. And what would we want to search for? We could look at all structured, unstructured data in files. We might look for semi-structured data in emails, on websites, on browsers, within our SharePoint servers or our SharePoint site. As I said, we can look at any database, or we could look at remote drives, USB sticks, mobile drives, or send agentless search discovery teams out to other servers that exist across the network. When we find that data, we can apply actions to ensure compliance with GDPR and minimize our sensitive data footprint. We can shred the data. By shred the data, we will overwrite the data between 3 and 7 times based on your requirements, because deletion is not secure. If you delete sensitive data may be recovered by an on-deletion tool. Excuse me. We can redact the data, again, very important for GDPR. If data is anonymized, it falls outside of the scope of GDPR. So if we redact, let's say, the first 12 characters of a credit card number, or the person, if somebody like Danny says they would like to be forgotten, and I have the ability to search across all of the structured and unstructured data and email systems, and redact all personal information relating to Danny, Danny's data then falls outside of the scope of GDPR. By redaction, we actually do a physical character replacement of the sensitive data. This is not a mask, because again, a mask could be removed, in which case the action would not be secure under GDPR. And of course, we can classify the data. One of our classic, most popular actions is to quarantine the data. So let's say we find HR data outside of the HR department, we can quarantine it to the HR department. Or if we find data that is older than our retention policy, we might want to, based on the type of data, to quarantine it to specific locations. So financial data gets quarantined to a financial quarantine, HR data to HR quarantine. And then we can alert via our email notifications specific subject matter experts to review this data to make sure there is nothing that we want to retain within that data set. And if they have not changed or modified that data within 3 months, then we could apply the shred action. That's one of our classic workflows that we're often asked to apply. But also unique in Spirion, we have a tool called Data Watcher. And what Spirion will do is once a piece of a file has been saved or edited and saved back to disk, our Data Watcher will automatically pick that file up and classify it in real time. Based on the edit, we could either upgrade the classification to the highest level, or if sensitive data has been removed from the file, reduce the classification of that file. The key here is, although you can configure the system to do scheduled scanning, the most common one is to do a scheduled scan every 24 hours, Data Watcher will provide you with real-time data integrity and good data governance across your estate, should you so desire. It also reduces the amount of data that has to be scanned when the scheduler kicks in each night at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock or whenever you have decided to run your automated schedule. Next slide, Danny. And this is our Spyglass. Spyglass is a HTML5 dashboard that will give you a full overview of the data across your estate. On the top, we can see there's a timeline, and we can select from either the drop-down menus or using the sliders to drill in on a specific area. So if we had a breach over a period of time and wanted to understand what information was exposed potentially over that period of time, you can use the slider bars to focus in on that time period. Indeed, Spirion has been used by Sony Pictures to evaluate what data was exposed when Sony Pictures were breached last year by North Korean hackers. The chart shows the amount of sensitive data that we have discovered across the entire estate over the time period selected. The green line shows the total amount of data that has been discovered, and the red line shows the amount of that data that contains sensitive information. Now, during the first 3 months, the client was just doing scans as they added more servers and more locations, or endpoints as we call them, to their discovery process. So this is what you would get when you conduct a PIA, a privacy impact assessment, which is one of the key aspects of executing compliance against GDPR. You will have to create your data privacy notices, and those data privacy notices publicly state how you're going to collect data, how you're going to share data, how you're going to manage data, how you're going to manage consent. And it is against those rules, your statements, your business rules, that you need to conduct a privacy impact assessment. And the privacy impact assessment gives you a snapshot at that point in time of how much data is exposed. We then use the sensitive data heat map, this cloud map you can see to the right. We use size and color to indicate the amount and type of sensitive data that is exposed on the various endpoints across your estate. And we can drill down into departments, into service, and individual users and see what users actually have access and are exposing the most sensitive data across your organization. This is very important because GDPR compliance is not just a technological challenge. You also need to incorporate training. So this helps you identify those members of staff and locations where you need to increase your training for good data governance and GDPR compliance across the infrastructure. All of the widgets you see here are context sensitive, i.e., if you change the selection on any one widget, the other widgets automatically update. And I could drill all the way down to look at the individual data of Danny's that has been exposed over a period of time. I can see what searches I've done. I can see what actions I've taken. I can see the classifications I have assigned. And I can show what current searches are currently being executed across the estate. So one of the things under GDPR, I have to be able to show compliance with the ICO in the event of a breach. Dashboard allows me to do that. Spyglass allows me to show at the left-hand side that we did not have good data governance. We had a lot of exposure, but we can show to the ICO exactly what efforts we have done and what actions we've taken and where we have taken them to minimize our risk and to demonstrate that our organization has executed best efforts to be compliant with GDPR. If you note, on the left, we can see a widget called classification data. The very last metric there is GDPR right to be forgotten. Our system can scan across all of your legacy systems and all of your new systems that have privacy by design built into them and detect all information specific for an individual data subject. And that facilitates compliance with all of the individual rights as defined within Articles 14 to 22 of GDPR. We have the ability to restrict access to the data. We have the ability to export the data. We have the ability to shred or redact through the right to be forgotten. And all of the other rights can be supported not only across your new systems, but across your historical legacy systems. Next slide, Danny. So as I said at the start, again, one of the keys of your GDPR compliance will be compliance with defining your policies and your procedures, your good data governance. Those help drive your data privacy notices. But GDPR compliance is not just about electronic data. You also will have to do a full audit of the physical files that you have in your filing cabinet or microfiches. That data, if it is scanned and is available electronically after an OCR, can be processed by Experian. But all of your data privacy policies, all of your GDPR business rules and procedures can be configured and executed within Experian using the Experian workflow engine. So once you have a handle on and working with companies like Telematics to help drive your policies and procedures, those can be configured in Experian to enforce your GDPR compliance in the background without adding to your staff's workload. Next slide, Dan. So as I mentioned, one of the things the ICO will look for when they come on site is have you conducted a PIA, a privacy impact assessment? And if you cannot demonstrate that you have executed a privacy impact assessment, they will hold you as being non-compliant. Now, your classic consultancy company will turn around and tell you that you need to have a PIA, and your PIA should have a secure approach. You should have mastery of the process. You should have accuracy of execution. You should have robust reporting, and you need to have trusted compliance. Well, that's good. I know that before I start, but how do I operationally deliver on each one of those points? And there's a link in here for those of you who are interested that'll take you to the PIA Code of Practice from the ICO's website. Next slide, Danny. In this slide, which will be contained within your handouts when you download, I give 5 examples operationally as to how you use Spirion to deliver on each stage of a PIA. Yeah? So it's not just about the theory of a PIA. You can use Spirion to deliver operationally and show those results through dashboard or through the reporting engine, not only to the ICO, but to your board and to your senior stakeholders. For a GDPR project to succeed, you will have to get the engagement and the support of senior stakeholders, most likely at board level. You will need to be able to demonstrate to them how exposed you actually are, how much sensitive data you are, and what steps are going to be required to ensure compliance over a given period of time. And again, you constantly will be referring back to the spyglass, the dashboard, to show your senior management team, your board of directors, exactly what actions you have taken to protect their organization and their brand in the event of a data breach. Next slide, Dan. So as I mentioned earlier on, if you were to ask some of my American colleagues, what is GDPR? The first thing they'll talk about is the right to be forgotten. That's basically because Google lost a court case in Spain and was forced to enable the right to be forgotten functionality across the Google suite. But there's also the right to be informed. The client needs to be informed as to what data you contain about them. They also have the right to access to see that data. If the information stored about them is incorrect, they have the right to rectification. They have the right to erasure and to be forgotten. They have the right to restrict processing. If they don't want their data to be used in automatic marketing, you need to be able to restrict processing to prevent that happening. They have the right to notification within 72 hours if you believe there has been a significant breach of their data due to a breach across your infrastructure. They have the right to portability. If they want to say, I want to move all of my data from one bank to another bank, you have to somehow facilitate the exportation of all of their data from your estate to a third party's estate. They have the right to object to their data being used. And as I mentioned earlier, they have the right, again, to in relation to automatic decision making, to prevent their data being used in profiling. If you can automate that, if you can anonymize that data through redaction, you can continue to use the data that was collected from them in making these decisions and making the profile, because it is no longer personal. But you can see here, there's a lot of challenges. And if companies do not honestly know where the data is at a macro level, how are they going to find it at an individual data subject level? It's impossible. And now you can no longer charge for this. Many companies in the past have used an excuse. When somebody says, I would like to be forgotten for your system, often you were required to submit a letter in writing to them and give the holder of the data 3 months in which time they had the ability to search for your data and to delete it. That is no longer the case. If I would ask you within your own organization, could you search your organization for all data specifically related to you? You would be quite unique in the world if you're able to hold your hands up, hand on heart, and say, yes, I have the ability to find all of my personal data across all of our databases, all of our emails, all of our cloud storage, all of the drives across the entire estate and across all of the network. I have yet to find any company in the world capable of doing that. And now we have to be able to do it for all of these rights, and we are no longer allowed to charge. Next slide, Danny. I should, of course, point out that with Spirion, all of this now becomes possible automatically for you. So what I've hit upon here, or tried to address, guys, are some of the key articles of GDPR that people talk about. What I've done in the remainder of the presentation, and I won't go through each one of the bullet points, I will leave those for you to read as you watch the presentation or through the handout, is take each one of the articles of GDPR as it relates to the management and good data governance of electronic data, and try to give you a specific example as to how you use Spirion to address those specific requirements of GDPR. As I said, in assisting and cooperation with the supervisory authority, Spyglass is your #1 portal. In terms of security of processing, the redaction, the encryption, we've discussed those actions before. Being able to notify a specific individual what of their data potentially was exposed during a data breach. Again, Spirion through its Spyglass and reporting engine facilitates that to happen now for you within the 72-hour time window. Next slide, Danny. I've included this slide because I think it's often forgotten. One of the key things that Spirion allows you to do, Spirion itself gets installed on-prem on a Microsoft SQL server with an IIS front end. But because we are here to facilitate your business, we do not obfuscate our classifications. We expose our classifications to third-party systems so they can drive their business rules based on our classification, because we are a data at rest solution. One of our key partners in this is Intel. We will actually provide our classification to their DLP solution. We also have a REST API, so we can provide all of our security information to SIEM systems such as Splunk. But one of the challenges now I have is moving data across borders. So at the moment, the main concern is how do I share data between the UK or the European Union and the US? The Spirion will allow you at no extra cost to install a separate server, or separate service should I say, to address European data and US data, so you can ring fence your data set. You may also want to consider that post-Brexit, because the EU will most likely fall outside of European law. It depends on whether it's hard or soft. None of us know the answer to that at the moment. But again, to facilitate your business, you might decide that you want to have a specific console installed in the UK and another console on mainland Europe to facilitate your European data sets. Again, what we're trying to do here is facilitate your successful business deployment with real world considerations. Next slide, Danny. Now, I've included this slide because I feel this is the slide that gets the most abuse. Every training course I've gone on, every seminar I've gone to, everybody has talked about the 4% fines or the 20,000 euros potential fines that will be enforced by the ICO in terms of a data breach or non-compliance with GDPR. That is strictly correct, but not very accurate. The reality is you will only be subject to those sorts of fines if you've done nothing, if you've been shown that you have not made best efforts to be compliant. More likely, you will be subject to the 2% of the 10,000 euro fine, dependent upon which article you are found to be in non-compliance with. However, there are a few companies that I have engaged with who believe they're not going to do anything with GDPR until the first fines have been issued. The only thing I can say to companies such as that is let's hope they're not one of the first companies that are found to be in non-compliance, because they will be subject to the 4% data fine. For example, in a recent article in Computing Magazine, it discussed the recent breach a few months ago of Tesco's bank, where they lost like £26 million over one weekend. Had GDPR been enforced at that time, the potential fines for the Tesco group would have been £1.9 billion. That is a significant amount of money in anybody's book. Next slide, Danny. So as I said, there are other articles that are important. The key one here, and relating back to Danny's data points, I'll need you to read this slide yourself. Stored in the database in your CRM system, but then people use it in emails. USB sticks. They put it on their notebook so they can take it home and work with it. So we all know where data should be. One of the challenges we have is knowing where data is not, or where data is located when it should not be there. Another thing that you need to consider too under GDPR is while we know what service should contain GDPR and PII data, you will also need to audit other systems that you believe should not contain sensitive data to validate that they do not contain sensitive data and be able to prove that to the ICO's office. Next slide, Danny. Any questions? I thought there should have been one more. Yes, that's fine. We're good. Danny, I'll hand back to you.
Thank you very much, Joe. And we have had some questions, so I shall bring them out now. The first question we have is the classification persistent?
Excellent question. Excellent question. Yes, again, when we classify the data, as I said, we write into the metadata a header of the file or into the alternative data stream for the file. That means the classification stays with the file for the lifetime of the data. There are some systems out there that if you move the file or you email the file or you put the file up on the cloud, the classification gets lost, which is worse than not having classified it in the first place. So yes, our classification is persistent with the file until the file is deleted or shredded. Excellent question. Yeah.
The second question, I actually know the answer to because I was listening. Does the system support real-time discovery?
Again, I believe this is unique to Spirion. But in one of the earlier slides, I mentioned our tool called Data Watcher. Data Watcher will monitor any file share or any directory across your network. And once data is saved to that file share or to that directory, it will automatically execute the client's business rules. So you get real-time data discovery, data classification across the locations of the estate.
Perfect. And you can't go a GDPR webinar without a question about the cloud. Can it scan the cloud?
Yeah, so we can scan the public cloud, we will scan the private cloud, we can scan cloud-based applications such as Salesforce.com. Natively, you'll find support for Box, Dropbox, OneDrive, Google Suite are all supported as standard using Spirion. We will also support AWS and we also support Azure.
Perfect.
Excellent question again.
The last one's quite long-winded, but I guess I'd summarize it down to you made the claim that it can scan structured data. Is that actually correct? I think they've had an indication that previously structured data couldn't be automatically scanned.
Very good question. So one of the things, if you remember back when I showed the toolbars of the Spirion agent, one of the buttons was databases. You click down there, you will see connection strings for all of the standard databases like Oracle, SQL Server, MySQL. There's a variety of them in there. So long as the database is visible across the network and we can make an OLE, DB, or an ODBC connection, we can interrogate that data for you automatically.
Perfect. I will wait just a few more seconds to see if any more questions come through. If anyone has any questions, you can type them in now. I don't think so.
Good. Well, either they loved it or they didn't understand my accent, Alex.
Well, I just want to say a big thank you, Joe, for coming on. I know you're working remotely, so we really appreciate your time. And
my pleasure.
Thank you to everyone who attended. I hope you found that useful. As I mentioned at the start, the slide pack is available in the handouts. You can download that. And there are also upcoming webinars. The dates are on the screen at the moment, looking at user access management, data loss prevention. We would be really happy to see you there, but if there's no more questions, say thank you once again to Joe. Thank you to everyone who attended, and have a great afternoon.